Sometimes you'll never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory. Michelle Collins. Unfortunately, we take advantage of things until we no longer have them. In that moment, when you realize it's gone, you miss it. That is how I feel about where I grew up. I took advantage of it and never really appreciated it until now. The place you grew up had a great value in your life. It is where you started and where you came from. The place you called home, it has created you and turned you into what you are today. The place you called home once upon a time, or the place that you still call home, is a place you will never lose memory of. For me, unlike some, I had 3 childhood homes. My first house I will always miss, 712 South Cedar Street, where my life started and where half of my elementary memories came from. It is where I learned to be kind, to love, and to play rough with the neighbor boys. I had so many memories from that house, let alone. It is where where I spent my first 10 years of my life. In those first 10 years came beautiful memories. Like when my dad would wake me up in the middle of the night, I was maybe like 4 years old, and he would tell me Jack Frost came, and I was so excited to see the falling snow. Or the memories of struggle, like when my parents went through the beginning of their divorce and how hard it was on my brother and I. After that, my dad moved out, my mom moved us to a historical house on Lidditz Pike. This was my favorite house, 901 Lidditz Pike, apartment 2. This was the most beautiful house I had ever lived in. We lived upstairs, in the upstairs apartment. This house was built in 1853 and had so much history behind it. In the attic were historical documents, old dresses, furnitures, and doctor kits, photos and dolls, all from the 1800s. This is where I began my love for history. My mother fought for the house to be preserved as a historical landmark of Lidditz. This house ended up being sold and torn down, for a credit union took its place. 133 Church Street. This had to be the biggest and nicest house we lived in. It is also the most expensive. I remember when we first moved to this house, my best friend Felicia and I would put our snow gear on, run outside and play in the snow until our hands turned cold. I remember I had a rough time trying to transition into this school. During the process of trying to move, my mom got hurt and was unable to work due to an accident. Finally, when I thought things were calming down, we were moving again, but this time it was out of state. These, however, were not the only significant homes I grew up in. My best friend's house was a place I called home. For over the past 11 years of my life, I had called this place my home. It is where I learned that family was not always blood. For a kid who grew up with family out of state, I was fortunate to be taken in by my best friend and her family. This was a place that I spent every weekend of my elementary years. They even went out of their way and bought me a mattress to sleep on so I would no longer have to sleep on the floor. We would even go on special trips on the weekend when they knew I was coming over. We would go hiking, or we would go out to eat at Texas Roadhouse or Friendly's. We would go we'd go downtown and to the chocolate factory. They were always up to something and always kept busy. One of my personal favorite places was to go downtown Lidditz. Who wouldn't love downtown Lidditz? It was the place to be. There was the famous and historical Linden Hall, where girls from all over the world would come to study at the private school. So you can say Lidditz was pretty diverse. There was our very own Wilbur Chocolate Factory. Everyone knew they had the best chocolate, besides Hershey's, of course. In the middle of town was Lidditz Springs Park, where if you were from Lidditz, you would know of the famous lion protecting and watching over the citizens of the town. It is where every little kid loved to be, where they could feed the ducks and to also be chased by the ducks. There was also the Lidditz pool, where most of the town spent their summer and where I would lose all my money. There was always something happening in Lidditz. The place you called home once upon a time, or the place you still call home, is a place that you never lose memory of. The memories I have taken from each house my family had lived in will always stay with me forever, and have shaped me into the person I am today. The family I had gained and the endless weekends I'd spent with Felicia I will never forget, and the town that once upon a time I took advantage of are all the places that tell my story. This is a place I called my home. It is a part of my story and a place I will never forget. Your home should tell the story of who you are and be a collection of what you love and brought together under one roof.